And then we will, oh, there you go. And then we will also send that to you along with any links or handouts later. So if you can't get them right now, don't worry about that. You will get them in an email following up. All right, so but right now I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Louanne Stanton. Louanne entered the grief world when her 35-year-old husband died from a rare blood disorder. She said that after years of fumbling through support groups and intuitive actions, she actually found herself helping others through their grief by some of her untraditional methods. She got her certificate from the Grief Recovery Institute in 2015, which I was interested to learn there was even such a thing when I first heard about Louanne, and founded an organization called Reflections Grief Recovery that is now known as Loss 101. And again, her website is loss101.org. So if you want to look that up, you can. Otherwise, you'll get that in the follow-up email. She's helped more than 325 people who have taken her 8-week course to say goodbye to pain and any significant loss. She lives in North Carolina with her second husband, her 6 dogs, and 2 cats. Spends most of her time writing, playing with her animals, reading good books, and hanging out with her favorite grandchildren, because they're all favorites, right, Louanne? As a grandmother, I know that, yes. And again, we just want to let you all know that you are muted, and when we get ready for any kind of Q&A, we'll unmute you. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Louanne. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here today. I don't know if you guys can see me because it just pops up a picture of me. So I'm hoping that I'm not just a voice on the other end of the line. I don't want to put you to sleep on a gorgeous afternoon. So
we do see your picture, just so you know, we do see it.
Okay, that's fine. So I entered the grief world unconventionally, and I love the work that I do because it allows me to tell stories and connect with people and let them know that they're not alone. So I'm going to start with, a very painful and familiar story in our world today is that we see people that we know and love slipping away with a disease that they have been diagnosed with: dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS. There's just too many horrible diseases. And the story that I tell is that, there was a woman who was diagnosed with dementia, and her daughter was taking care of her. And every day her daughter would see changes in her mother. And it got to the point where her mother was having difficulty dressing herself, and she would forget her daughter's name on occasion, and other details about she was mixing up grandchildren with children, and it was a sad situation. But as the mother continued to slip away, the daughter kept trying to get the mom to be the mom that she knew and loved that raised her. But that could not happen because the mother was dying with dementia. And so it happens with every situation that the situation continued to get worse. And eventually it turned into, you seem to be a nice young woman, but what's your name? And the daughter was struggling with continuing to try and take care of her mother and trying to figure out how to take care of her own family. And it just got overwhelming. So she had to find 24-hour care for her mother. Now, the daughter at that time had all kinds of conflicting emotions. She felt very guilty for having to put her mother in a 24-hour facility, but she felt relief because now she was going to be able to get an uninterrupted night's sleep. There was frustration at the visiting hours and the restrictions that she had now that her mother was not living with her. And then there were the regrets for the things that she had not said or the things that the mother had not heard her say. The daughter is experiencing grief. And if I could see this entire audience and say, please raise your hand and tell me how many of you have had a story like that or a grief in your life, everybody would be raising their hands. You see, because grief is simply the conflicting emotions caused by the end or change in a familiar pattern of behavior. So what I did was I put together this worksheet for you guys, and I want to let you know that society does not prepare us for any grief that we have. I know that you all are probably going to be saying these with me. We're muted, so I won't hear you, but I will fill in the blanks as I know you will be saying them out loud. At the top of it, it says, most of us grew up in a household where our parents handed out sayings like we wished they would hand out candy. Here are some lines for you to fill in the blanks to see how normal of a childhood you experienced. The first one is, if you're going to cry, my parents always said, go to your room. So if you had go to your room or stop crying, then that's something that we all heard together. It's okay. Time heals all wounds. And we know that is not true, because if I said, how many of you are still grieving someone who left you here on the planet more than 20 years ago, my hand would be raised, because I still miss my husband. And I know that you all have people that have died longer than 20 years. Time does not heal all wounds. Laugh and the whole world laughs with you. Cry and you cry alone. You are still young. You can have more children. You can get married again. You can get another job. There's all kinds of things to fill in the blanks with that one. Don't feel bad your dog died. You can get another one. And this one, I tell people, you're going to have to think back. I'm 58 years old now, and I still remember the first love that I had when I was 14 years old. And I was convinced that if I could just run away and marry him, that we would be successful in life. So when he broke up with me, and it broke my heart, and I went running to my mother, she said, don't worry, it's just puppy love. There are plenty of other fish in the sea. And then there's another one where people say, just stop thinking about it and get back to work. And then my parents were famous for saying, if you don't stop crying, I will give you a reason to cry. The next one is, the best way to get over that relationship is to have another one. And then this one is, you need to be strong for your children, your parents, your family. And then the last one on the paper says, I know how you feel. I lost my blank, my mother, my father, my daughter. Anything that people say, I know how you feel, I lost my as well, is not a helpful statement. It typically angers people, because no one knows how you feel, and no one knows what we're going through, simply because every relationship is unique and individual. And so when we do our class, that's one of the things that I tell my people, is that it doesn't matter if you say your mother died and my mother died. It's not the same thing, because your relationship with your mother may be different than my relationship with my mother. So I don't know how you feel. And people say that with me, well, you're widowed, so you understand what I'm going through. And I say, no, I don't, because I was with my husband for 13 and a half years, and you were with your wife for 63 years. So I don't understand what you're going through. Yes, the end result is an intellectually common statement, but I do not know how you feel. So when we say that society does not teach us how to deal with grief, one thing that I like to use as an example is, if we were all in one room together and someone walked into the conference room and tripped when they came in and fell, and they got up and they said, oh, I think I broke my arm. We could look around at each other, and I guarantee you there would be someone in the room that would be a nurse or have some sort of medical training, and they would know how to handle the situation. The least person would be able to at least call 911 and get some help. But we are trained through the Red Cross, through other avenues when we're growing up, and what we gain in our experience in employment, to be able to help someone in a health crisis. But where's the broken heart, or the 911 for a broken heart? There is not one. We don't know, and we're not taught how to deal with grief. We are taught to intellectualize grief. Now, you may be saying, Louanne, okay, this is great. You're talking about grief, but this is a Parkinson's group. What are you doing talking about grief at a Parkinson's group? Well, people do not recognize people who have Parkinson as grievers, but you are. The reason is because you have gone from being healthy, thriving individuals to people who have a disease that has to be managed with medicine at best, and your entire life changes around that diagnosis. So the grief comes in when you have the feelings of things that you have lost and things that you cannot do anymore, and not knowing what the future holds. It's a change in your familiar pattern of behavior. So our society is ill prepared to help you because it's not that they don't want to, it's that they don't know how to. Number one, they don't know what to say. And I know, it's when people come to a receiving line when someone dies, and I say, and they go through the line to be comforted by the person who is left, they don't know what to say. And they want to help, and they hug and they say, I know you're going to miss him, or he's in a better place. And those things are not helpful. And so people don't know what to say when you've been diagnosed with Parkinson's, because they are not walking in your shoes and they don't understand what changes are transpiring in your body, in your mind, and in your spirit. People don't know, they're afraid of our feelings. So they want to help, but they're afraid of saying something that may upset you or me. They're afraid of our feelings because when we were very young, we were taught that sad equals bad. On the playgrounds, when you were little, you probably heard people cry baby. And so you were taught not to cry because you would be made fun of. Their emotions are just emotions. They don't have a girl sad and a boy sad. They don't have a girl mad and a girl bad or girl mad. Emotions are simply the way we feel. And society takes those out of us. I tell people, if we were in a group, I'm sure we've all been around children at some point in our lives, and we put a 2-year-old child in the middle of us as we were sitting around in a circle. And that 2-year-old baby has their blanket and a sippy cup and some toys. And I looked at one of you and I said, reach in there and take all that stuff away from that child. If you reached in there and took all of that, what is that 2-year-old going to do? That 2-year-old is going to kick and scream and probably just, I want my stuff back. Now, if we put a 10-year-old in the circle and gave them whatever 10-year-olds have, I know mine has a used phone with no cell phone service, and she loves to have her Barbies still. And so if we took those things away from a 10-year-old, she may cry, but she's not going to kick and scream. She's going to say, please just give me those back. I want them back. But if we put a teenager in that circle with their phone and their Xbox or whatever gaming system they are playing on, and we said, let's take all their stuff away, chances are that kid is just going to shrug and say, I don't care. I'm just going to go get another one. I don't want it anyways. because by the time they're 2, till the time they're teenagers, we have socialized out the normal and natural reaction to a loss. I don't know about you guys, but when my husband died, I did kick and scream. And my normal and natural reaction to the loss was to throw temper tantrums, not necessarily in public, in front of other people, but I had to get that frustration and hurt and agony out. And you may have done the same thing. I highly recommend, there's a place in Salisbury, I know you guys are further south, called the Grievous Gallery. And you can go to this place and you can throw bottles against objects and smash them. And the energy that is released by that action is fabulous. So if you ever want to just release some energy, find a rage room or some place that you can physically do some damage that you don't have to clean up. All right. People don't know how to help us, and sometimes they try and change the subject. If you say, if someone comes up to you and says, "How are you?" and you say, "Oh, I'm having a really bad day today. I've had trouble with this and I'm not sure how it's going to come out," they may change the subject and say, "Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. Hey, did you hear that Martha was going in the hospital because she had pneumonia?" And they just completely change the subject because they don't know what to say. And a lot of times it's because people don't hear what we're saying to them. There's an illustration that we use when we're teaching a grief class, and it's about a little girl. Her name, we'll call her Mary. And Mary had a party planned. She had invited all of her friends to come over for a sleepover while her parents had a cocktail party downstairs. And so the day of the party arrives and Mary started getting phone calls, and every single one of her friends canceled. Well, her parents said, "Mary, don't feel bad. It's okay. You can come down and listen to music and you can just be part of our party and everything will be fine." But Mary didn't want that because Mary had planned a party with her friends. So she was pouting and she was just being unconsolable. Well, her uncle saw her sitting in the corner and he came over and he said, "What's wrong?" And Mary said, "I was having a party tonight, a sleepover, and everybody canceled." Excuse me. And the uncle gave her a hug and said, "Mary, I am so sorry that that happened to you." And when he was done giving her a hug, Mary went upstairs, changed her clothes, and came back down and had a good time. Now, nothing really had changed. None of her friends had come. But the thing that had changed was that her uncle had heard her and told her that he was sorry that she had to go through this. And a lot of times, that's what we as grievers want people to say for us, is not listen to us and try and fix things, but just to hear us and give us a hug if it's appropriate, and tell them that they are, or tell us that they are sorry that we have to go through this. What I do with my students when we have a grief class is I allow them to reset relationships that have had pain and suffering in them and reset them to the current day. The story at the beginning when I was speaking was the story of my mom. And my mom has had dementia now for 3 years, and she recognizes me most of the time, but I can go and take her out. I can help take care of her there. I can visit with her there with no hint of the past life that we had together, which was very challenging because I did the grief work that I do with my students on my mom, who is still alive, to allow me to say goodbye to the pain and the suffering of the relationship that we had and bring it to the current day. And when you reset a relationship to the current day, it allows you to deal with the challenges of the day for one day. And I feel like I'm not saying that correctly. Sometimes I can see in people's eyes when I give an example and it's not clear. But when I did this grief work on my mother, it allowed me to say everything that I needed to say to her without her knowing about it. And I was able to say goodbye to all of the challenges that we had in the past, and I can have a relationship with my mom beginning today. And I handle today, I treat her with respect. I tell her anything I need to say. And if there is a challenge today, we handle the challenge and then we move to tomorrow. I tell people that I'm not a religious person, but I am a woman of faith. And I do believe that we have been called to live life abundantly. And it's really hard to live an abundant life when we're hanging on to the baggage from the past, from us, from people and things that have hurt us. And so by doing the grief work, and you guys can find this book online, I'll send the link to it. It's not my book. I don't make money off of it, but it's called the Grief Recovery Handbook. And it gives you action steps to walk through to say goodbye to the pain of a relationship. The reason I speak to Parkinson's groups, and you guys are the third Parkinson's group that I have spoken to, is because when you are dealing with the challenges of Parkinson's and you think, I wish I could still do X, or I really hate that this is happening to me now. And it takes energy away from the life that you could be living today by wishing things were different and not being able to live in the moment today. So that's what I like to do, is help people be able to live in the moment, because we're only on this earth for a short while. And I am a firm believer that we should make the most of every day that we are here. So I will now open the floor if there's questions, if there's comments, if you guys have anything else that you would like me to say. This is where I say thank you very much for being here today.
So Louanne, somebody did, who wanted to be anonymous, asked this question. She says, my husband has advanced Parkinson's and I find myself grieving the loss of the man who he was.
Yes.
What can I expect when the end really comes?
Well, the nice thing about life is that it's always a surprise. And it's always a mystery. And there's a lot of buzz around the words anticipatory grief. And personally, and this is just Louanne's opinion, I don't believe in anticipatory grief, because if you're saying that, then you are grieving. So what you would do is the way this process works. The method is you would create a relationship graph of you and your husband's life. The first day you saw him and all of the good and the bad and the ugly of the relationship up until today. And when you do that relationship graph, it allows you to see everything about your life with him. Then you would take each of those events and you would put them in one of three categories. And I'll be more than happy to spend more time on an individual basis with someone. But you put them in a category of an apology, of a forgive, or a significant emotional statement. And then you actually take all of those components that you've written down and you write a letter that you do not read to him. You read to someone else, a living, breathing human that will listen to you and you can be heard, of all of the things that you want to say to your husband. When you do that and you say at the end, because it's a very specific, start of the letter and ending of the letter, when you do that, what you're doing is you're saying goodbye, like a conversation. I'm saying, thank you very much, goodbye, this conversation is over. And when you have that conversation, that last conversation, when you say goodbye to it, you start the relationship over new, and you will stop grieving how he used to be and how you think he should be and all of the things that you're going to miss doing with him. And it simplifies your relationship into living in the present moment. Because when someone is in advanced Parkinson's, you can't fix that. And I'm not trying, it's reality. And so you need to be able to live a peaceful life with him as long as he's here. And I tell people, you can't even try and imagine what it's like when your loved one is gone, simply because even if they die from a prolonged illness, it's still an unexpected death. And everyone reacts differently. So I wish I could say, oh, this is what you'll feel like, but I can't do that. But thank you very much for asking that question.
If anyone else has a question, you can put it in the Q&A, or if you know how to use the raise a hand at the bottom of the screen as well, you can click raise a hand and I can unmute you so you can talk. So I have a question about, so first of all, a lot of the people on this call are caregivers from what I'm seeing, just because I know quite a few of them are caregivers.
Yes.
And is there a way to identify by how caregivers are responding to their situation with their Parkinson's loved one, that maybe it's really a form of grief, but it's being acted out in something other way? Is there a way to know that? Like, if I'm doing this, or I'm thinking this, am I really grieving what we're losing or what he's losing, that kind of thing?
I think that most people are grieving when their person gets a diagnosis. You start the grieving process then, and it does not stop until that person is gone, and then it still continues, because we grieve for what we are losing. That, when my husband died, way back when, and all of the griefs that I've had since then, but I say he is my defining grief in my life, because I say before Dennis and after Dennis. But when he died, that grief that I felt then, I felt different types of griefs since then around his death. He wasn't here when my daughters graduated high school. He wasn't here, so I mean, there's always things. Caregivers, you're going to be grieving the entire way through, but there are ways to lessen the suffering of your grief, if that makes sense.
Right.
Sorry, I got off on a tangent. I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, no, that was fine.
Yeah.
Someone else asked, is all of this grief work that you are talking about available and explained in the Grief Recovery Handbook?
Yes, it is. That's what I use when I teach. Every class and every one-on-one that I use uses the Grief Recovery Handbook, and it will walk you through every step, and it will encourage you to get a partner, because part of the process is grievers feel like they're broken, like there's something wrong with them. And grievers are not broken. They just need to be heard. And so if you get the Grief Recovery Handbook and choose to do it on your own, just make sure that you have a partner that you can actually say your homework to, because that will enrich your experience and help you each week become better of saying goodbye to your grief.
Right. Did you want me to bring up that myths document just so you could kind of explain it or talk about it?
No, because that's just the 12 if you're gonna cry, that type of thing. It's just a handout.
Okie doke. Let me see, somebody wants to, let's see, who was that? Raise their hand. Let me find them. I think it was Katushk. Yes, Katushk wanted to say something. I've unmuted you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is a lot of work to grieving myself even, and it's very hard for me. I have my husband, and my husband has been detected with Parkinson 15 years ago. And what I think, which is more grieving for me, is to see the transition or the progress of the illness, but also how can help him, or how can I help myself continue, confronting the reality it's very hard. It's very hard. But also it is hard for me to understand. Well, I understand. I feel that I understand, and sometimes I don't feel that I understand anything.
Yes.
But the progression of having and the mix of depression and also the movement, sometimes he can do it, sometimes he can't do it. But I feel like, what is this? Is that him? If he's doing this in purpose, or it is not doing in purpose? Well, I live with him more than 35 years now. And I feel that I know him, but some attitudes that he has is uncontrollable. I can't. And I feel like I'm going to give up. I need to find something else that, a place that he can be, because I can't do it. It's kind of sometimes a battle every day, and some days not. So sometimes I try to ignore and just go for. So what you will recommend it, even though I talk with him, I express what I feel, but he feels like I am negative towards him.
First, I'm so sorry that you've had to be walking this path for 15 years. That's a very long time in my book to be walking that path, and I'm so sorry that you have to do that. I know that it was a very tough choice for me to put my mother in a 24-hour facility, but I did it, number one, for her safety. Not because of mine, but because she would get better care from the people that were there. And then it allowed me to be her daughter again, instead of her caregiver. And, if you get to, 15 years is a very long time to walk that lifestyle. And if you have lost you because of the identity that you've become now, his caregiver, and you don't feel like you can do anything outside of that, and this is just a personal opinion, I would at least start visiting that, because it would allow you the freedom to become a wife again, and to have a different type of relationship with him. And I'm being able to live in the present, which I'm sure you do, just living in the present moment and saying what you need to say. And sometimes if it's unkind, that's probably your patience wearing thin. After 15 years, I'm sure. But, if he were someplace different, then you would not have the hyperactive level of frustration, because you're not doing it all by yourself.
Right. Okay. It's I think it's very hard for us as well, for my daughters. He had been dated in early age, around 47, and now he is 61. So it's long, and it's frustrating. And I understand him. I understand how he feels, for doing everything and now not be able. But as you mentioned, what is the other option? I think is something in the long term. I need to think about that. But how to choose a place? Where do I need to be looking? Is that a special place? Is the retirement center the place? When the rehabilitation center? Where is the place that I can given a chance for him, because even I volunteering him to different places, he goes one time and then he says, no, that's it, I don't want to go anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I think that would be different if he has more a structure and have a routine that will make
Yes.
him better.
Yes. I will go through, I have a list of resources and personal connections, and I
Mhm.
will reach out to them and see what types of facilities are best as far as, having a Parkinson community within the community.
Mhm.
And I can send that to your group leaders, and they can, send that out to you guys. I can do that research and have that to you by the end of the week if that would be
Okay.
helpful.
I would really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and Katush, just so you know, that's what we do. We connect
Mhm.
people with senior living arrangements and communities that have Parkinson's folks, already have Parkinson's folks
Mhm.
there. So Louanne, I
Okay.
would definitely love to see your information, and then
Okay.
Katush, we can definitely talk about that. I spent about 20 years in the Charlotte senior living industry. So I'm familiar with, assisted with memory, long-term care, and various options.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely feel free to reach out to us and we can talk about that too.
Okay.
But we'll get your, if you'll send your email, I should have your email from signing up. So we'll
Mhm.
reach out to you for
Okay.
sure.
I would
You
really
already have an
appreciate
expert in your corner. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of what I do myself personally, just because I have that experience, be able to tell people, what communities we have that have support groups, because they already have Parkinson's people there and they have
Yes.
support groups there that the caregivers can come to and attend. So yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So we're happy to
Okay.
do that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Also, I have another question. Someone asked, as a person with Parkinson's, are there any techniques you recommend to deal with that grief? That you could maybe, give some ideas.
Sure. The same work that I was just talking about with the wife whose husband was in the advanced Parkinson's, and that she could do the relationship graph and then do the recovery components of the apology, forgive, and significant emotional statements. You can do that on yourself with your health. And it's very helpful because then it allows you to acknowledge the things that you're angry about, the things that you need to apologize, because I have talked to a few people with Parkinson's who feel guilty that maybe they did something that created this disease. And so, if you feel the need to apologize for something that you feel you did to your body, then that would go on this list. But it's very helpful because it allows you to take all of the emotions from all of your health during your lifetime and be able to reset it to where you are today. And you may, it's just like when we were little, when we had to write thank you letters to people, or we wrote letters to our loved ones when we were in school, and we would get the whole letter written. And then at the end, we'd say, oh, P.S. And then we would put in another note. That's what you would do with your health condition. You would reset it to today. And then when you got to the point where you felt that you needed to do it again, you would write a shorter version of that letter. But it's very helpful. I have done it on my health, and I've done this relationship graph on probably 8 or 10 other animals, a couple of cars, a house, and many, many, many relationships. So I do this work and I teach my kids and my grandkids this work, and it is life-changing.
Thank you. I have another gentleman, Mark, who wants to ask something.
Okay.
Mark, I just, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question. Are you there? Mark, if you're there, we can't hear you. Well, maybe I'll come back around. You might be having, do you have your volume up all the way? Okay, well, I'm going to mute you again and go back and go to someone else, and then I'll come back and we'll try it again. Okay, let me see if anybody else did. Okay, someone made a comment though in the chat. She said that sometimes she would separate her husband and his actions and interactions from those of the Parkinson's patient.
That's a very smart way to do that, by compartmentalizing it. And I'm sure that that has been helpful. This just puts everything together instead of compartmentalizing it. But I know that that's a very smart way for some people to handle something as grievous as this.
Interesting. Okay, Mark, can you unmute yourself and so that you can ask your question? Maybe we can hear you. Do you have your volume turned on and up? We still can't hear anything. Well, if you want to put your question in the chat or somewhere else in the Q&A, we can ask Louanne if we get a minute. Is there anyone else who had any questions or wanted to run something by? Katushka, I see your hand is still up, but I think that was from before. Mark, are you there? No, still not there. All right.
Or Mark.
Oh, there. Wait, are you there, Mark? Nope. Okay. Well, if that's everything, unless somebody has something, if you think of something after, I'm happy to shoot an email to Louanne, and we will definitely in our follow-up email send all the links to everything, the name of the book, the Grief Recovery Handbook, the link to the myths document that Louanne had, and anything else that you guys ask us about. If you think of anything, send an email to PAC at parkinsonassociation.org, and we'll get that if you think of anything else. Louanne, thank you so much for making time today to join us at our virtual support group. We had quite a good group of people, and just thank you for all that information and for providing your thoughts and your experiences and how you dealt with things.
I was honored to be here. I really appreciate you all letting me be here, and please feel free to reach out to me if you've got any further questions.
I do have one other person. Do you have time?
Sure.
Okay. Romy, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and talk?
Oh, yes. How do you have a summary of the steps taken in the book? Because I've been reading it, and it asks you to make diagrams of all the losses in your life, etc. And it seems like it's a lot of additional grief to experience. If you go back to your entire life of everything you've gone through while you're processing, in my case, the death of my spouse of 30 years, it just seems to add on a lot on the pile.
Well, it does. And that's why we do it over an 8-week period when we have a class, or I do, work with people individually. But the reason it's an 8-week course is because we start with, what does society say about grief? What were you taught about grief? How do you handle grief? And then we do the loss history graph, which is, and I tell people, we're not digging through the sand looking for tiny morsels. I tell people, get a sheet of paper and take an hour, and whatever your brain puts down in an hour are things that need to be acknowledged. Because when we experience a loss, it creates a negative impact on our life. And depending on how we hold on to that loss, it can be a lifetime of negative impacts. So when we do that loss history graph, the reason we do it is to allow those losses to be acknowledged. And the ones that do not pass, that are still stuck in your head, those are the ones that we do the next steps on, beginning with the relationship graph. So, you know, if you have the book and you just skip to chapter 10, that's where it starts with the relationship. But chapter 9, which is the loss history graph, will allow you to see which losses you really need to work on. But yes, it's a tough emotional class, but it's well worth it to work through those losses. My oldest student that I've had so far was 92 years old. And she came to me because her 53-year-old son had committed suicide and she just couldn't function since her son had died. But when she got to the loss history graph and she did her loss history graph, she discovered that the loss that was taking the most space in her heart was her sister, who was still alive. And so we did the work first on her sister, and then we were able to go back and do the work on her son. And when we got done with the course, she said, I really wished I had taken this class in my 60s. And that just made me laugh because, you know, at 92, it made a significant difference in her quality of life.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Well, if nobody has anything else, I don't see anything anywhere. Or I'm going to let you go then. Thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you all for joining us today and to hear Louanne and to get some of your questions asked. And again, as we said, you'll get everything in a follow-up email. It might be early next week before you see that to give us time to gather everything together. But otherwise, I do want to let folks know here that we will be having our annual Caring for Parkinson's, Caring for You Symposium in September. It'll be Saturday, September 10th, and it'll be at Calvary Church. So obviously you're on our email list, so you'll be seeing that information going out in the next couple of weeks of how and where to register. But we just wanted to give you that information now so you have it. And we thank you again, Louanne, very much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. And I really did appreciate being here. And again, feel free to reach out to me with any further questions.
I will. Thank you so much.
Okay. Have
All
a
right.
great day.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.